we're grateful for your perspective here as a legal practitioner with a long and fruitful career in Oklahoma, including being on the team that prosecuted the Oklahoma City bombing case. But as a former prosecutor and currently a litigator, you've sat on both sides of the courtroom. Can you expand for us with some thoughts about what information would be useful for lawyers and judges to determine the validity of forensic evidence, and how to judge the qualifications of that forensic expert witnesses? Because these are issues you've dealt with.
So,
and that's a very open-ended question. I understand that, but
it is. With regard to educating lawyers and judges about forensic science and its validity, I guess is a better way to phrase it, I think that has to come through education. As I told you before, as a young prosecutor, when an analyst came into my office or forensic scientist came into my office and they said, this test means this, or this comparison means this, I took that without a question. And so I think it's important, and I think there has started to be discussion amongst lawyers, prosecution and defense lawyers, about sometimes we don't get it right, and sometimes science needs to be validated and it needs to be tested. So I think that's the most important piece as far as educating and talking to practitioners. We have to rely upon forensic science, as I said before. With regard to, I think it's important for judges, as I said in my written testimony, have a gatekeeping function. Before any expert can testify in a criminal proceeding or a civil matter for that matter, a judge has to evaluate the credentials of the person testifying and evaluate the science under 702, 703, the rules of evidence. But sometimes judges as well are not well educated on the validation or lack of validation of certain scientific techniques. And so I think in that respect, even though judges will continue to have a gatekeeping function, they need better education.
Mr. Gammett, let me turn to you. Idaho, like Oklahoma, is made up of many very rural communities. And there's special challenges in collecting and analyzing forensic evidence in rural communities. I assume Idaho is much like Oklahoma. My county sheriffs and my deputy sheriffs, my local chiefs of police, and their patrolmen literally are jacks of all trades. They do everything in these little communities. What recommendations do you have for ensuring that no matter where a crime occurs, we can have confidence in the way forensic evidence is handled?
Thank you for the question. I do see challenges in our rural agencies that we try to address first by direct training. So we send out our staff, we send them from the crime lab itself, and we educate these officers. We work together in partnerships. We collect evidence alongside of them, which I think is mainly important there. We want to prevent any unequal access to justice. So meaning a small community should not have less access to forensic services than you would have in a major metropolitan community. So we need resources to be able to put into all of these local communities, training, education for these officers, early training at post and those sort of things to be able to address these needs that they have.
Because literally in Oklahoma, my local law enforcement in many cases on the city, county level depend on the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. And by the time you have an event occur that requires that kind of data collection, it can be an hour or two sometimes before their specialists can get to the field to some different part of the state. And this information does deteriorate after all. In my final moments, I'd like to turn to Mrs. Ballou and discuss NEST being given the challenge of bringing scientists, law enforcement, and lawyers together to achieve consensus. Tell us how that process is working, putting all these various minds in the remaining time together.
So you can imagine when you set up a new organization that there will be bumps in the road as you progress. And it was a learning experience. We found with the OSAC, with the size of it, 550 members, actually it was a little larger when it first started, is that bringing everybody's personalities, expertise together, and those who actually indicated that they learned a considerable amount from being part of that organization as to what they initially thought was an easy task to do, And after listening to the other experts, whether it was in statistics or academia, they realized there was a lot they needed to learn also. And so at this point, NIST has learned that there are some changes that are needed in the OSAC process to make it more fluid and to obtain faster and increased results from it.
Expired, Madam Chairman. Yield back.
Thank